A friend once told me there were supposed to be 4 new evolutions for Eevee in Pokemon Gold and Silver. The 2 that are already in the game are Espeon, a Psychic type, and Embryon, a Dark type. The other 2 were dropped from the game. These were Poison and Ghost types. I wasn't convinced this was true, so I decided to see myself by trying a beta of Pokemon Gold. The beta ROM was hard to find because most of the ROMs were either normal, not beta, Japanese, or didn't work. When I finally found a working ROM, I loaded up to search for the new Eevee evolutions. I wasn't quite sure what to do to get the Eevee to evolve into a Poison or Ghost type, so I just played the game normally, and I figured at some point I would finally work it out. I eventually ended up beating the Elite Four in all of Kanto. The game was pretty much the same other than a few different locations, dialogue, etc. Oh, and Dunsparce didn't seem to appear. But I wouldn't complain about it too much, I don't really like Dunsparce. But by the time I beat the game, I still hadn't figured out how to evolve my Eevee. I tried leveling up, night, day, in caves, etc. After hours of trying, I finally decided to find the evolutions the easy way, by cheating. I tried to use the Game Shark codes, but most of them did nothing, so I decided to ask for help, and someone on Newsground said he could work on a code that should give me all the items. After a few days, he sent me back a code that I could put into the Game Shark. I loaded the beta ROM, and sure enough, the code gave me exactly every single item in the game. I looked through the items and everything was pretty much the same, except for an item called Toxic Stone, which I knew this was the item I was looking for, and especially for my Eevee. I used it on Eevee and nothing happened. The game simply told me it had no effect. I tried over and over again, but nothing. I was mad. Was this all I got after I went through the whole game? There had to be something wrong, so I thought maybe one of the NPCs could help me out. I got the typical text from the NPCs. Man at Team Rocket sure is persistent. I sure love my Jigglypuff. Have you visited the radio tower in that Kanto region? But one NPC told me something that stood out. Did you know that there was a stone that could evolve Pokemon after it fainted? This was where I went wrong. I had to use Toxic Stone on my Eevee after it fainted. At least I hope so. My Eevee didn't take any time to be defeated, especially since it was around level 40, and I was in a level 60 area. After it was defeated, I went to my bag and used the stone on my fainted Eevee. What's this? Eevee is evolving? Yes, finally! Eevee has now evolved into Zombreon. This was not exactly what I was thinking. A Zombreon looked like a normal Eevee, but green coloured, and parts of it was missing. Also, its cry was just a lower version of Eevee's. Oh, and once it evolved, it learned a new attack called Zombite. But this was all I worked for? A recoloured Eevee? Come on. I calmed down a bit and decided to test it out on some tall grass near New Bark Town. A wild Centron appeared, and I threw the Zombreon out. I figured it would be pointless to use a move like I have used a million times, like Tackle or Flash, so I used Zombite instead. The attack animation was odd. It looked like Bite, but with 2 poison symbols flashing near the teeth. The attack was one hit KO'd, according to the text box. But what was strange now is that the game asked me if I would like to nickname Centron, and even told me that Centron was sent to the PC. I didn't use a Pokeball, so why did the game say I called Centron? I rushed over to PC and checked for Centron. It was not a normal Centron anymore. It was now green, a poison type, and it had now had the move Zombite. Wait, I know what's going on. Every time I use the attack Zombite, which I figured means Zombie Bite, the enemy Pokemon will get affected and join my team. This is pretty obvious, considering Zombreon was basically Zombie plus Eon. I wondered, what happened if I affected a trainer's Pokemon? I used Fly to go to one of the routes in Kanto that I skipped out of, and ran into a trainer. The battle started, and the opposing trainer threw out the Kadabra, and I immediately chose Zombite. It was a one-hit KO. But rather than throwing out my next Pokemon, the opposing trainer just came out and said, "What did you do to my Pokemon?" The battle was won, and received the XP and money. After the battle, the trainer was simply gone. Just gone. In fact, none of the trainers were there either. This began to creep me out a little bit. I walked around the area looking for another trainer, but nothing. When I walked into the grass, a wild Kadabra appeared. Although this wasn't a normal Kadabra, it was green and zombie-like, like the Centron was, and I didn't even have to fight it. It just lost all its health, and the game told me I caught it. I began to get a little creeped out, so I began to head back to the town when another wild Pokemon appeared. It was a normal-looking Raticate. I didn't want to fight it though, so I pressed run. It didn't work. Zombreon is staring at the foe hungrily, the game has told me, and then the Raticate attacks Zombreon with Bite. But after the attack animation is played, the game said Zombreon countered the attack with Zombite, and then the Zombite animation played, causing the Raticate to lose all its HP and join my team. I wanted to get out of this area immediately, so I went into my team to use Fly. I wasn't expecting what I saw. All of my Pokemon were now green and zombified, and all of them knew Zombite. I made my Lugia use Fly to take me to Saffron City. When I got there, all the NPCs were there, which helped me relax a little. I decided to go into the Pokemon Center to check the PC. When I did, the game let out an ear-splitting beep that made me jump a little. In front of the center's counter was the trainer with the Kadabra that I defeated earlier. A text box came up. That's the man that hurt my Kadabra. And then the trainer ran to the corner. Then the trainer ran to the corner of the Pokemon Center. A man sitting on one of the seats walked up to me and said, "Don't worry, I'll stop him." And then I was forced into a battle. He sent an Arcanine and I sent a Zombreon. I tried to use Tackle and it worked, but after then the animation finished. The game said Zombreon used Tackle, followed by Zombite. The battle ended, and when the game went back to the Pokemon Center, a greenish sprite of Arcanine stood next to the man. "What happened to my Arcanine? What are you?" the man said before running out of the Pokemon Center. The Arcanine walked up to me. The game told me that Arcanine was sent to the PC box, and then the Arcanine disappeared, which was starting to get kind of creepy. I tried talking to the trainer in the corner, but all he said was, "Please, no more." I tried talking to the nurse, but all she said was, "Get out of my Pokemon Center." I checked at the PC, and sure enough, I had zombie versions of all the Pokemon from earlier. When I backed out of the PC, I noticed a new option on the PC screen, called Released All. I tried pressing it, but it told me, "Not enough Zom Pokemon. Darn." I walked out of the Pokemon Center, and the speakers on my computer were filled with a loud barrage of high and low pitched beeps, and all the NPCs outside of the center ran towards the exit of the city. I tried to talk to one of them, but they were moving too fast to do anything. When I walked out of the town, there was no trainers around. I figured that it went to a different city. Everything would be normal, so I figured if I went to a different city, everything would be normal. So I made my Lugia fly to the Goldenrod City. When I landed there was no NPCs here either, and the music wasn't even playing. I tried walking to a building, but the game told me the door is locked. I tried a few other buildings, but those were locked too, so I went to the Pokemon Center. The door opened as usual, and I went inside. Nobody was inside of it though, but I noticed something new. There was what appeared to be a radio on the counter. When I interacted with it, the text box came up. "Beware of a strange Pokemon. Trainers from the Kanto region have been reporting strange green Pokemons attacking and affecting other people's Pokemons and trainers. Remain indoors and avoid all contact with strange Pokemon and people," followed by, "I'm so lonely. ... I figured there was nothing to do down here, so I walked to the second floor. On the second floor, there was a bunch of NPCs standing still, facing the stairs. Once I got to the top of the stairs, a loud beep played and a text box said, "Get out of here. You aren't normal." A trainer standing in the front of the crowd ran up to me and a battle started. The opposing trainer sent out Ditto, and I sent out Zombreon. I tried using Flash, but instead, the game said Zombreon spat poison at Ditto. After the battle, the man backed up into the crowd, and suddenly Zombreon walked out, and the game said Zombreon cannot wait any longer, and Zombreon ran into the crowd, touching every single trainer in Pokemon. When it touched Pokemon, they would turn green, but when it touched the trainers, the game would let out a loud beep, and then the trainers would disappear. Once all the trainers were gone and the Pokemon were affected, a new text box appeared and said, "Jigglypuff, Abra, Ditto, and Clefairy were all sent to the PC." Then the Pokemon would disappear. I checked my trainer card because I remembered the trainer from earlier saying that I wasn't normal. Sure enough, my trainer was zombified too. I felt kinda sick. Would Game Freak really do something like this? I shook off the feeling and tried to fly to a different town, but the game told me Lugia is too weak to fly. Great, I went back to the Pokemon Center to get a new flying Pokemon from the PC, but when I looked inside, all of the Pokemon in the PC were affected. I tried getting out my Pidgeotto by pressing the withdraw button, but it would just play a loud buzz noise that would usually mean that you're not allowed to do something. I couldn't move Pokemon either, so there was only one thing I could do. I saved the game first and then pressed the release all button. The game asked, "Would you like to release all Zom Pokemon?" Yes, all Zom Pokemon has now been released. I checked the box and all of the Pokemon in the PC were gone. I was confused. Was it the purpose of an option like this? I walked outside, and I got quite the surprise. Parts of the buildings were on fire, windows were boarded up, and the NPCs were running from green Pokemon. I couldn't interact with Pokemon or trainers, so I decided to walk out of town. The areas outside of the town were similar in the way. A few trees were on fire, and there were grey particles moving in front of the screen, which made it look like the screen was all smoky. Walking into tall grass didn't cause wild Pokemon to appear, but I could talk to small amounts of NPCs that were standing around. They would say things like, "I had to hit my poor Pikachu with a stick. He just wouldn't stop trying to bite me. Who started this? I want it all to end. I want to go home to my family." I eventually walked to Violet City, then to Cherry Grove City, and then finally to New Bark Town. This was the only place that wasn't normal, sort of. The trainers were walked around outside of buildings that weren't there anymore, so I went into the laboratory to see if it was empty too. It wasn't. Inside was a single professor. Once I stepped forward, an exclamation point appeared above his head, and he walked up to me. I finally finished it. A gene that protects Pokemon from the poison stuff that has caused all the Pokemon to turn strange. This is where it all begun, and this is where it all will end, he said, causing the battle to start. The game said the Professor Elm wants a battle. He sent out a level 86 Feraligatr. I threw out Zombreon. I knew Zombreon was too weak to handle this, so I switched out to Lugia. When I tried to use any attack other than Zombite, Lugia would end up using it anyways. And when Lugia did, I would get a message that would say it had no effect on Feraligatr. After this, the opposing Feraligatr used an attack called Cure. This was super effective and defeated my Lugia right away. My next Pokemon was a Typhlosion, but the battle was almost the same when it went for Lugia. I tried using Flamethrower, but instead of Typhlosion used Zombite, and when instantly defeated by Cure, the battle went on like this until I got into Zombreon. I pressed Zombite at this point because I knew what was coming. It didn't work, and Feraligatr used Cure, Zombreon was brought down to 1 HP. The game said Zombreon refuses to give up, Zombreon uses Struggle, Feraligatr was instantly defeated, and Zombreon was defeated by the recall. Professor Elm came up to me and said no, 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 and the battle ended. After this battle, Elm took a step back and said, I lost. It's over. It's all over. I want to end this pointless game right now, and ran outside the lab. I went outside and a text box came up. Why did this have to happen? I didn't understand who said this since there was nobody around. I thought maybe someone was in my character's house, so I headed there. Inside was my mum. She was sitting on a chair in the house as usual, so I tried interacting with her. She definitely wasn't doing anything usual. It's mum, ... She ain't moving. This text made me feel sick, and I didn't expect the screen to cut to black after the text box is closed. The screen faded from black into the opening screen where you would enter your character's name, but my character just stood there, and the text below said, all of this is my fault, all those people, my mum, Eevee. But was it really my fault? My character glared at the screen for a split second and cut to black. Then the game went straight to the credits. Nothing was different, all of the other Pokemon were there as usual. Once the credits were over, the emulator froze. Now whenever I tried to load up the beta ROM, the emulator just freezes. I then realised this was only one of the 2 evolutions for Eevee. The ghost one was probably in Pokemon Silver. I can't imagine what would happen with this evolution of Eevee, and to be honest, I don't even know.